The lights were too bright. Not the studio lights, but the metaphorical ones, the kind that exposed every flaw, every hesitation. Pam Bondi stood center stage of the Justice Unfiltered town hall special, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she addressed a carefully selected audience. Her voice was calm, trained, and sharp. Justice, she said, pausing for emphasis, is blind. That's the beauty of it. It doesn't see race. It doesn't see wealth. It sees the law. Denzel Washington shifted in his chair beside her, arms folded, his gaze locked on her with quiet intensity. He hadn't spoken yet, the crowd was waiting. Waiting for Denzel. Because when he spoke, it was never just noise. It was a statement. Pam turned toward him, invitingly, or maybe challengingly. Would you agree with that, Mr. Washington? There was a beat. A heavy one. Denzel leaned forward. If justice is blind, he said slowly, then why do we keep getting seen? A low murmur rippled through the audience. Pam stiffened slightly. What do you mean by that? What I mean, Denzel said, voice still calm, is that justice always seems to have 20/20 vision when it comes to people who look like me. Suddenly it's not so blind when we're pulled over, when we're sentenced, when we're gunned down and someone says, oops. Justice seems to have eyes, and a preference. The audience, made up of community members, legal professionals, and national press, grew quiet. A camera zoomed in on Bondi, whose smile faded for a moment before snapping back. Well, if we're going to discuss the justice system, we should do it with facts, not emotion, she responded. Denzel's eyebrow twitched. Facts. Like how black men are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated. Or how prosecutors are twice as likely to seek the death penalty when the victim is white and the defendant is black. Those facts. The moderator shifted nervously in his seat. Bondi's voice sharpened. We're not here to shame the system. We're here to improve it. Denzel nodded. You can't fix what you refuse to admit is broken. Now the tension was a living thing. Cameras panned to the audience, faces locked in expressions of unease and awe. This wasn't just a debate. It was a reckoning. Pam Bondi didn't flinch, at least not publicly. Years in Florida's political trenches had taught her to keep her poker face ironed, but her fingers tightened slightly around her notes. The system, she said, her tone clipped, is not perfect. But to stand here and suggest it's inherently racist is not only divisive, it's dangerous. Denzel didn't blink. What's dangerous is pretending the system is neutral when it's been weaponized since day one. The crowd stirred. This wasn't just a talking point, it was personal. A man in the third row nodded slowly, his arms crossed. A young black woman behind him whispered something into her friend's ear. The moderator glanced from one guest to the other like a referee who'd lost control of the ring. Pam straightened. You're speaking in absolutes. That's not how justice works. You want reform? Fine. Let's talk policy. But this kind of rhetoric. Rhetoric? Denzel interrupted. You think I'm rehearsing this like it's a scene? This isn't a script, Pam. This is lived experience. And I don't need bullet points when I've got bullet holes in my community. That line hit like a hammer. The crowd gasped, then clapped. It wasn't applause. It was release. Tension spilling out of the room like a kettle finally allowed to scream. Bondi's eyes narrowed. That kind of language incites. You're turning pain into performance. And you're turning justice into PR, Denzel snapped back. You stand up here like justice is a logo. I stand here because it's been my fight. The moderator raised a hand to intervene, but neither of them was looking at him. They were locked in, eyes sharp as razors. Pam exhaled tightly. I didn't come here to be vilified. And I didn't come here to be pacified, Denzel said, voice low but piercing. So maybe we're both out of luck. Now the silence was sacred. There was no recovering the calm. There was only forward. The studio had stopped breathing. For a few suspended seconds, every camera, every mic, every crew member simply existed in stillness, caught between broadcast and breakdown. Then, like a snap of wind through a tense forest, Denzel leaned forward. "You know what's worse than injustice, Pam?" he asked, voice velvet but sharp. "People who dress it up in patriotism." Pam Bondi's smile twitched. It was the kind of smile you wear when you've lost a round but refuse to show it. "I'm not here to defend everything that's gone wrong." "Then what are you defending?" Denzel cut in. "Because so far all I hear is, trust the system. And I'm telling you, the system doesn't trust us." Her jaw locked. "You want to burn the whole thing down?" "No," he replied, measured. "I want to stop pretending the fire alarm isn't already screaming." A murmur rippled through the studio. On Twitter, the hashtag #DenzelUnscripted was already climbing. Phones buzzed. Producers in the control room leaned in closer to their monitors. Pam adjusted her blazer, her voice rising. "This kind of theatrical posturing isn't going to help anyone. What you're doing, it's emotional exploitation." Denzel stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't point a finger. But his presence filled the space like thunder without the sound. "You keep calling it theater," he said. "That tells me everything." Pam blinked, confused. He gestured to the audience. "You see a stage. I see a courtroom that never gave us a jury of our peers. You see a performance. I see the consequence of centuries." She shook her head. "You're twisting." "No," he said. "I'm untwisting it. That's what scares you." The moderator tried to move to commercial. Too late. Denzel turned to face the crowd, speaking directly, his voice clear and unrelenting. "If the law is blind, then why do we keep getting seen, stopped, and sentenced? Maybe the blindfold slipped. Or maybe it was never there." And for the first time in the broadcast, Pam had no comeback. The lights were still on, but it felt like truth had walked in and taken over the room. Pam inhaled sharply, the polished veneer cracking just enough for the audience to see the steel beneath. "I won't be lectured by someone who's never served in office," she said tightly. "I've worked inside the system. I know how messy justice is, how hard it is to keep order." Denzel cocked his head slightly, calm but unflinching. "You talk about order like it's a virtue. But whose order? Because from where we're standing, order has been a leash, not a shield." The crowd stirred again, some gasps, some nods, all eyes locked on the stage. Pam leaned in. "So what, Denzel? You want chaos? Mob justice?" He chuckled, low and dry. "No. I want truth. I want people to stop pretending like what's fair on paper is fair in practice. That a courtroom treats a poor kid from Atlanta the same way it treats a hedge fund baby from Connecticut." Her eyes narrowed. "You're indicting the entire legal system on television?" He raised a brow. "Maybe it should have been indicted a long time ago." The moderator looked like he might faint. The teleprompter was flashing like a warning beacon. But no one dared cut to commercial now. Denzel stepped forward, his voice thick with lived memory. "You sat behind desks, signed off on policies that locked people away for decades over a dime bag. And now you want to play the adult in the room?" Pam's posture stiffened, but she said nothing. He continued. "Justice without accountability isn't justice. It's performance. And I'm done applauding it." The room felt heavier. Even the lights seemed dimmer, as if the truth was too thick to shine through. Pam's voice, when it finally came, was barely audible. "You're angry." He nodded. "Yeah. And if you're not, you haven't been paying attention. That line shattered whatever illusion of neutrality the show had left. Online, Denzel's face was already plastered across headlines. The courtroom is broken. Denzel's on-air indictment. Truth hurts. But in that moment, he wasn't chasing viral. He was chasing something deeper, reckoning. The studio didn't breathe. No music cues. No applause. No scripted follow-up. Just silence, a silence that Denzel filled with presence alone. Pam shifted in her seat, blinking faster now. So what's your solution, Denzel? Tear everything down. Let criminals walk free because the system isn't perfect. Denzel didn't blink. You think justice is a building with marble columns and flags. I think it's a mother praying her son makes it home alive, and not because he did something wrong, but because he exists. Pam tried to interject, but he held up a finger. Firm. Measured. Lethal. You say justice is blind, he echoed, his voice low, but we both know it's got one eye open, and it's always watching the same people. The studio camera zoomed in, catching the flicker in Pam's gaze. You sat on cases where evidence was shaky. Where sentencing was political. And you kept going, like the machine demanded blood and your job was to pull the lever. Pam's voice returned, brittle. That's not fair. I followed the law. And that's the problem, Denzel fired back. The law isn't justice. The law is written by the winners, upheld by the protectors, and enforced on the broken. There it was. A line that sent shockwaves through every control room monitor. Pam leaned forward, trying to steady the tone. You speak like you've got all the answers. He smiled, but it wasn't warm. I don't. But I've got the questions. And that makes me more dangerous than anyone you've ever cross-examined. Viewers at home paused their dinners. Journalists rewrote their headlines. Politicians scheduled emergency calls with their media teams. Pam Bondi, once the face of law and order, was being unraveled, not by rage, not by lies, but by calm, inconvenient truth. And the gavel? It never dropped. Pam Bondi sat straighter, reaching for her earpiece as if reinforcements might pour through. You're an actor, Denzel. You deliver lines. I enforce laws. Let's not confuse entertainment with enforcement. Denzel slowly tilted his head, letting her words linger like an insult that needed no reply. Right, he said quietly. Because truth is only allowed in courtrooms, not on cameras. He stood, not storming, not grandstanding. Just calmly standing. The director panicked. Camera 2 went live. Then camera 4. You want to talk about enforcement? Denzel asked, stepping toward the studio's edge. Tell that to the families whose doors were kicked in over suspicion, not proof. Tell that to the man whose body was buried before his case was even opened. Pam interrupted. We can't function without order. And what is your idea of order, Pam? Denzel cut in, voice rising now. Compliance? Silence? Knees to the floor and eyes to the ground? The studio lights caught the edge of his jawline, sharp as his tone. Order built on fear isn't order. It's obedience. And obedience to injustice is what got us here. The live chat exploded. Hashtag Denzel Unfiltered. Hashtag Pam's Truth. Hashtag Justice Under Fire. Pam's voice cracked for the first time. You're simplifying a complex issue. And you've been complicating a simple truth, Denzel replied. If the law doesn't protect the most vulnerable, it's not justice, it's privilege with a badge. Even the hosts who were supposed to redirect the segment sat frozen. Denzel turned to the audience, millions beyond the studio. Justice doesn't need to be blind. It needs to be brave. And with that, he sat down, leaving a void of noise, of excuses, of polished deflection. Pam looked down at her notes. But the script had already burned. The silence stretched for several seconds, until Pam Bondi found her voice. But it no longer held the iron assurance it once did. "We are a nation of laws, Mr. Washington," she said, her tone tightening. "And if people start questioning that, undermining authority, what's left is chaos." Denzel leaned forward. "No, what's left is accountability," he said, crisp and cutting. "And if authority can't survive questions, it never deserved power in the first place." Applause erupted from behind the glass walls separating the studio crew from the stage. Not scripted. Not cued. Just raw. Pam straightened her blazer. "So what, we throw out the system? Rewrite it based on emotion?" Denzel didn't flinch. "You think this is emotion? Pam, this is math. Look at the numbers. Look at who's jailed, who's bailed, who's failed by your system. This isn't a script. This is a record, on repeat." He turned to face the camera again. "You say, justice is blind. But somehow, it always sees us first. Always." Pam tried to interrupt, but Denzel raised a hand, not to silence her, but to silence the entire illusion. "You don't get to weaponize law and call it order. You don't get to cherry-pick peace while planting seeds of fear. That's not justice. That's performance art with a prosecutor's badge." Someone backstage whispered, "He's not acting, he's testifying." Pam's smile returned, but it was no longer conviction. It was containment. "You've had your speech, Denzel. But speeches don't change statutes." "No," he said calmly. "But they change minds. And minds write statutes." Pam took a breath, visibly trying to steady herself. "You speak well, Mr. Washington. But you're still just an actor. This isn't Hollywood. It's the real world, filled with imperfect people doing their best." Denzel's smile disappeared. "No, Pam. It's filled with powerful people doing what's best for them. Don't sanitize this with nobility." The audience shifted in their seats. This wasn't a debate anymore. It was an unmasking. "I've played prosecutors, judges, and convicts," Denzel continued. "But you know what's wild? The fiction is often fairer than your reality." Pam interjected, trying to maintain control. "You're reducing years of policy and procedure to emotional rhetoric." "Policy?" Denzel snapped. "Your policy locked up a 14-year-old for stealing food. Your procedure let a hedge fund manager buy freedom after laundering millions. You want to talk about fairness?" She opened her mouth, but Denzel didn't let her. "I'm not here to debate crime statistics. I'm here to ask, who's writing the laws? Who decides which crimes get punished and which get protected?" The lights in the studio suddenly felt harsher, the air heavier. The conversation had gone off script, and into truth. Pam's voice dropped, almost pleading. "Then what's your solution? Anarchy?" "No," he said coldly. "Equity. The kind that doesn't wear a blindfold to avoid responsibility." The crowd behind the glass gave a low murmur, not the kind of applause Denzel had gotten earlier, but a deeper kind of response. Agreement. Awakening. Pam looked at the moderator, hoping for an interjection. There was none. Even they were frozen, locked into what had become less of a debate and more of a reckoning. The air felt like it had been sucked from the room. Pam's lips moved but produced no sound. Her posture tightened, shoulders drawn up like armor. She was no longer the unflinching prosecutor, just a woman on defense. "You want examples?" Denzel said, voice sharpening. "Okay. Khalif Browder. Spent 3 years at Rikers without a trial. Accused of stealing a backpack. He was 16. He killed himself after release." Pam's eyes dropped. Denzel didn't let up. "Tamir Rice. 12 years old. Shot in 2 seconds. No conviction. Don't, she tried. Why not? Denzel thundered. Because it's uncomfortable? Because truth doesn't fit into your talking points? The crowd wasn't clapping anymore, they were leaning in. It was no longer a show. It was an audit of American justice. You wore power like a badge, but it became a shield, he said. You prosecuted without mercy. But where was that mercy when it came to justice for those who look like me? Pam's hands fidgeted with her notes, eyes scanning for something, a stat, a quote, a rope to hold on to. But there was none. And don't you dare act like this is about politics, he added, lowering his voice but not the weight. This is about humanity. And you don't get to claim blind justice when you see us, and still look away. The moderator tried to interject. Denzel silenced him with a glance. This platform? It's not yours anymore. It belongs to every name you forgot while defending a system that only works for the privileged. Pam tried one last time. We followed the law. Denzel raised a single finger. Then maybe the law is the problem. Silence filled the studio, but it wasn't peace. It was reckoning. Pam Bondi sat back, hollow-eyed, every rebuttal buried beneath the weight of what had just been said. Her perfectly rehearsed lines felt irrelevant. Her power, paper-thin. Denzel took one last breath and turned to the audience. You can wear the robe. You can quote the Constitution. But if your justice only works when it's convenient, then it's not justice. It's performance. He stepped toward the edge of the stage, the cameras tracking every movement like history was being written in real time. You say justice is blind? He asked, voice low. Then explain why it keeps seeing color. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Pam didn't move. Couldn't. Blindfolds don't erase the blood, he continued. They just make it easier to pretend you didn't see it. The moderator leaned forward, trying to salvage control. We're out of time. No, Denzel said. We're just out of excuses. He walked off the stage. No mic drop. No dramatic music. Just footsteps, real, grounded, unshakable. And behind him, a room full of people who would never watch justice the same way again. If you thought this was just another debate, think again. Denzel didn't come to play politics, he came to tear the veil off a system built on selective blindness. Pam Bondi stood for the establishment. Denzel stood for everyone it left behind. And in that moment, America had to choose, justice or just appearances.